Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Chopping Block. Every 4 weeks, the few of us get together and give the industry insiders' perspectives on the crypto topics of the day. So, quick intros. First off, we have Tom, DeFi maven and master of memes. Next, we have Tarun, the Gigabrain and Grand Poobah at Gauntlet. Then we have Laura. She is the CEO of the show. Is how she asked me to intro her.
Oh, please. You just called me that and you said I'm looking for...
I asked you how you wanted to be introed and you said the CEO of the show. And so I said, fine.
That is not how this went.
Okay.
You actually just called me that. And before you said you were looking for a way to intro me and I said, just call me that then.
Fair enough. Okay. So she is the CEO of the show and she's chief journalist on the Chopping Block. And then we have myself, Haseeb, head hype man at Dragonfly. So all four of us, I should say three of us are early stage investors in crypto. But I want to caveat that nothing we say here is investment advice, life advice, or legal advice for that matter. So this is our first show that we're doing in person. It's honestly kind of weird because every show in the past that we've done up till now has been over Zoom. And now all of a sudden we're sitting here in this like hot studio in Manhattan. And it's suddenly breaking the fourth wall a little bit compared to how we usually do things.
Yeah, and it's also weird because it's like so close. We're like still kind of in COVID, but like everybody's super sick of COVID. And
yeah, they just lifted the mask mandates. You know, now you don't have to wear a mask in Uber. You don't have to wear a mask in a plane. Nobody in the subway is wearing masks. So it's very, very different environment. I just came from Singapore, which is the exact opposite, where people are still extremely, technically the mask mandate in Singapore is lifted, but almost everyone there is still wearing masks, even outside.
Oh my God.
Which is bizarre because it's extremely hot in Singapore. It's like
you guys,
super humid.
You're probably not going to catch COVID outside. I'm just going to tell you that.
I know. It's just, I think it's a cultural thing. If you go in Singapore and you're walking around outside, the only people you see not wearing masks are the white people.
Oh,
all of the locals,
not crypto libertarian. What about
there aren't that many. Most of the crypto people in Singapore are Asian, and so they like bring the Asian energy of like, okay, follow the rules, like, you know, at least within your normal day-to-day life. In your alter ego, you break all the rules and then you run an unlicensed exchange or whatever. So yeah, it's interesting. How has been the book tour?
Oh my God, amazing.
Yeah.
You know, like I've been putting out these shows every week, twice a week, and doing it for years. And, I don't get a lot of feedback. And so like doing these book events has been like just so lovely. Like people come up to me and they're like, oh, I work in crypto because of you. Or like someone came up and was like, I'm your #1 fan. And then later his friend also saw me and his friend was like, he puts you up there with Vitalik. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
I had like a group of 4 college friends. They all listen to me. I've had like whole families. The whole family listens to me. There was like a person that he was like, oh, I got my wife into your show and now she works with blockchain technology. Like she like added it to like what she was doing with government. And like, I don't know, just there have been so many stories like that. I mean, there was somebody, she read my book so closely that she was asking me these like very detailed questions about the book. And I was like, whoa, like you like studied this thing, So the whole thing, honestly, it's just been amazing. Like I sold out the first event in New York, which like they were turning people away. I didn't expect that. I have a ton of fans in Utah. Big surprise to me.
Wow. You're like a crypto rock star now.
Yeah. There's been so many like just delightful things. So yeah, to everybody who came, thank you, because it's just been like, so lovely pretty much. And yeah, really, really unexpected.
How do you feel about the reviews? How do you feel about the reception overall on the book?
Really good.
Yeah?
I feel good. Yeah. I mean, it's like I worked on this for years and honestly, I'm just grateful that people are even reading it. You know what I mean? It's like people, there's a lot of content out there now. Like a lot of things compete for people's attention. And like the fact that people, I'm like taking the time to read my 400-page book, all of its footnotes. By the way, if you're a crypto OG, you can totally geek out in the footnotes. They're very fun. Lots of blockchain transactions and like Wayback Machine things and social media posts, whatever. But yeah, like the fact that they're doing that and like, sometimes they're like screenshotting things that they're just like interested or surprised by. And yeah, I don't know, like a lot of people have been buying like bulk orders as well, like, for their whole company or their whole DAO or like, yeah. So I've been doing like a bunch of kind of events for companies where like if you buy a certain number, then, I'll do a virtual event for you or even something in person. And So there's been a lot of that, like, and yeah, like there was one last week where actually what happened was it was just a conference. I gave a speech, and then one of the companies had bought the book to give away, and so there was like this signing line, and the signing line was huge, and like I had to stay for 2 hours signing all these books. I like couldn't even finish because I had this other appointment. I did not imagine it was going to take that long, and people wanted selfies with me. And like, it was interesting because not like at most of the events, everybody already knows me. It's already like a fan of my show or whatever. But here, a lot of people didn't know me already, but just from the one talk I gave, they like loved that talk. So they were like already fans from that. They were like, we loved your speech. And like, sometimes, yeah. Anyway, I could go on and on and on, but like the whole thing has just been like a dream and just so lovely. And yeah. So I'm like basically savoring every moment of it because I'm going to have to get back to work because I have like a lot of other projects coming. And so it's just like, I'm going to enjoy this time because like pretty soon I'm going to be hitting the ground running again.
Because I know you and you're a grinder, right? Like you're a workhorse. Like you've been putting out content consistently for years. And I know you've been grinding on this book for a long time. Yes. And so, you know, I know that feeling of like you're just working, you're putting out stuff, you're being consistent. And then eventually you come up for air and you realize like, oh, wow, all this stuff, like someone was actually consuming it all that time and they really like me now. And like that doesn't, it's often hard for that to land, especially in the era of like post-COVID and, you know, living in crypto, which is all online all the time. And it's like, there's so many elements of it that feel impersonal until you finally make contact, you show up at an event and people are like, you changed my life. And now I have I went into the industry because of you. And it's like, holy crap.
Yes. I've had so many people say that to me over the years. Like, it's really surprising. I remember when it started happening, like back in, like, I guess it was 2017, and just being like, oh, weird. But now it's like having so much. I'm like, oh, it's kind of crazy. I'm just, putting stuff out there and like it gets people interested and then they want to work in it. And it's cool, you know.
It's super cool.
Yeah.
Well, we are super proud of you. And seeing all of the incredible reception that your book has gotten has been just awesome to see, and I'm glad that you're savoring it because I know it's hard sometimes to actually really feel the success that you've had, and so it's awesome to go in person and feel that. Yeah, no, I know. I definitely did not expect like even a fraction of what it's been, frankly. So yeah, I'm very grateful for all of it, and honestly, I think the other thing I'm really glad about is we were a little bit nervous about the DAO attacker reveal. So the fact that went so well and like nobody, because, Forbes was not the first place I pitched it. I pitched it to multiple outlets, and some of the other outlets were like, oh, what if this is like when Newsweek tried to reveal who Satoshi Nakamoto was? And I was like, because it's like a weird thing when you pitch it, I couldn't reveal who it was because then if they wanted to, they could steal that and then like, front run me essentially, because there's a long lead time between when I had the information when the book was going to come out. And so like some places just backed off and they were like, what if you're wrong? And I was like, but like, because I couldn't reveal all the evidence, but I just knew like there's a difference between the kind of evidence I have and like what's previously been done around Satoshi. But anyway, so, my Forbes editors, they know me and whatever. And like, we have a very good working relationship and, frankly, we just love working together. So it all worked out super well. But like, it was definitely kind of like a dicey thing. And so the fact that reveal went well and like people are accepting kind of like, I've literally not seen a single person been like, you were wrong. So yeah, it's definitely, let's just put it this way. Journalists, when they're revealing that kind of thing in the crypto community, they don't generally get that reception. So I'm very, very glad that it worked out well.
It's like the convex bug disclosure from last week, and really the solution there is to have them add you as an editor to these publications, and then you can reveal it yourself so they can't front-run you. I think that's the solution.
Or we have zero knowledge proof reveals.
Yeah, that would be great.
Stuff. That's really more the like 10-year version of this.
That's the 10-year
reveal.
I agree.
Certainly. Well, so speaking of big reveals, actually one of the interesting stories of the week that kind of goes into, I guess it'll be the next chapter of the addendum to, or let's say the next version of the book. So last week, or I guess 2 weeks ago, last episode, we talked a lot about the Axie Infinity hack, and we talked a lot of shit about, or I should say, I talked a lot of shit. I don't want to put it on you guys about the irresponsibility of the Sky Mavis team for their OPSEC and allowing this hack to take place. So in the last week, we've learned something about who the attacker was. And we learned it actually in a very indirect way. So what happened was So the OFAC list, which is a list of basically sanctioned entities, or in the case of crypto, addresses that you're not allowed to send money to, otherwise you're in violation of sanctions. They added to this list for a group called the Lazarus Group, which is associated with North Korea. So it's a hacking group that basically is, I guess, a part of the North Korean government or associated with the North Korean state. And they're very notorious. They've engaged in a lot of different attacks. And one of the addresses that was added to the sanctions for the Lazarus Group was the one that was also used in the Axie Infinity hack, which implies that it was North Korea that attacked Axie Infinity, which is kind of wild.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the previous instances, I mean, we're looking at the 10T, or was it 10X? The 10X guy, most of the previous hacks that we've seen in crypto have been crypto insiders, or like, in my mind, I always imagine that it's like some Eastern European teenager living in their basement, or just like, just reads, random transactions on Etherscan all day. But it turns out that like, okay, North Korea is getting in the game because of the amount of money.
I don't know if you know, like pretty much all those South Korean exchange hacks, they were all like Lazarus.
Right.
Yeah, because I actually did an episode, I forget what year that was. Was it 2018 or something? But I had 2 North Korean experts that talked about like why North Korea is interested in crypto and stuff. So it's actually been going on for a while. But before it was, like I said, centralized exchanges in South Korea.
It's scary. I mean,
do you remember that around the time the Virgil Griffith thing first happened, there were these rumors that like the big LPs on Uniswap were like Lazarus Group.
I don't remember this.
This was like a very popular conspiracy theory as to like who was minting most of the early DAI.
Wow. And wait, was that ever confirmed, or was
No. It was like there were some addresses that happened to be depositing into some of the South Korean exchanges around the time of the hacks, but that was like, it's very like circumstantial. Like it wasn't. It was a little bit too much of a just so story, but the North. What I meant by that is like saying North Koreans aren't crypto insiders might be the wrong. I feel like they actually have been around.
They've definitely been around. But I think to me, it's a good reminder. So one, it means that, at least for me, it makes me more inclined to back off a little bit from how much I was blaming, Sky Mavis. Although, I mean, clearly they messed up in a pretty significant way, but it's pretty hard to defend against nation state level attackers. And obviously the Lazarus Group is really, really good at what they do. And it just kind of means that everything in crypto now is under the same level of bombardment and attack as the most valuable kind of, state level targets as well. And so it's scary. It's a good thing to keep in mind that there's the standard of security that you need to have in order to withstand all the pressure that DeFi protocols and on-chain applications have today is orders of magnitude what it was just 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, but I'm not like passing judgment on the Sky Mavis team, but I don't know if I'd back up on your judgment, frankly. I guess because the way that the security setup was, like, it wasn't, truly decentralized.
It wasn't. But, Robert made the point in our last episode that, like, look, these were probably not all, like, these were probably all different servers that the attacker was able to move laterally through within their network. And then they were also able to find another bug and sort of daisy chain this attack with this other thing that had this super, like, it was actually a pretty complicated attack. And I would assume that Robert was probably right, that not all these, not all these addresses, not all these private keys existed on a single machine. And so they probably infiltrated the entire network.
Well, a lot of it was phishing, right?
They got in initially through phishing,
Yeah.
but we don't really know exactly what.
By the way, I think probably everyone who is in crypto has received one of those. I probably get like 5 a week of these, like, hey, like Chris at a16z.com shared docs Google Doc with you, but then
something
you like
about stable coins.
Yeah, or like
we get that like twice a month. It's just like phishing attack related to stable coins.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get them too.
The solution is just archive all your email every day. Just clear out the inbox, and if someone wants to, they'll message you on Telegram, and that's the solution.
Yeah.
The Telegram spam has been increasing too. I'm wondering if there's going to start being more like spear phishing type things in Telegram. So be careful.
Yeah. But I just wanted to say, like I actually feel that this particular hack was like similar more to a centralized exchange because of the setup. Like it wasn't like a normal DeFi hack. It wasn't like an economic hack. It wasn't one that kind of like exploited a vulnerability in the smart contract. It was really more like a centralized setup that they were able to exploit, similar to the way that they had done with the South Korean exchanges. So anyway, so I don't know if that necessarily means that like North Korean hackers can hack DeFi contracts the way that you were kind of implying earlier. I just feel like, it's what I was saying before, like it's similar to a centralized exchange, but also the security setup for a centralized exchange is like, that's like pretty standard. Like, or I don't know, it's about standard, but it's been around for a long time because centralized exchange hacks have happened for like years, right?
Yep.
So I feel like it's easier to do security for that kind of setup than it is for like a DeFi smart contract. And that's why I feel like the Sky Mavis team kind of is, they screwed up, because this is something that probably like most people would know how to prevent. Whereas like a DeFi thing, I think is harder to prevent.
One thing though is like they're kind of in this worst of both worlds scenario because the centralized exchange at least benefits a little bit from security via obscurity. Like not everyone can't see the code for their actual internal processes and multi-sig and key management. Whereas the Sky Mavis thing was almost like overly transparent in the sense that you could see it because
yes and no. I mean, the fact that 4 of the 9 keys were held by them was actually not like,
that's true.
If you had known that, you would have been like, what the what? But they obscured that, right? Like nobody knew until the actual compromise. Like when you had to explain, how did you guys get popped? And the answer was that, well, we actually had 4 of the 9 keys. And it's like, what? That it's kind of the inverse of, it's like insecurity which you obscured.
Yeah. But I think, to Laura's point, these are more sort of social engineering style attacks, which I think they probably have more experience with rather than exploiting, super obscure, bugs and Solidity.
Yes, clearly it was not like a super deep, there's some corner case of Solidity or like some, VM hack or something. But at the same time, like it's also pretty hard to defend against these at scale.
Yeah.
Right. Like eventually, if you're bridges are like exchanges because you have to have like a hot wallet. You have to continually be signing things and moving money around. And so it is actually really hard to secure that. But look, I mean, I don't back off entirely from saying that Sky Mavis screwed up. Like obviously having 4 of the 9 keys controlled by a single party is absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, I don't know that anybody is able to fully resist. I mean, we just saw a recent hack of, what was it, Okta that recently got hacked. And story. Which is like an authentication company that,
you could basically think of them as like multi-sigs for normies. Like that's what Okta's business is, right? Okay. It's like effectively
normies.
I mean, they just like do.
I don't know why they don't put that.
That seems like that would be a big business.
It is. I mean, they're a huge
like
company.
$30 billion company.
Yeah, they're big.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like in a world where crypto actually succeeds, basically like multi-sig should basically replace Okta. Like Okta as a company might be gone, or like they'll just be a front end to a bunch of multi-sig. That I'm saying like in the like I'm trying to like give you like the idealistic future. I'm not saying it's like likely. We should. Oh, good.
No, but actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that because when I was in Miami, somebody actually told me about their idea about this. And it was actually really, really interesting. But then, I don't know, then I kind of was poking some holes at it. But anyway, the point is, I think a lot of people are noodling on this.
For sure. I mean, Gnosis obviously has the advantage, but I think especially on Solana, there's a lot of teams that are trying to like effectively do like treasury multi-sig type of stuff that will be kind of are out soon. So I think people want to really do it. I just don't. It's like hard for me to imagine like Fortune 500 buying this, whereas like Okta literally has like every Fortune 500 company using them. Yeah. So that's like sort of the difference.
As a frame of reference, they're a Coinbase-sized company.
Okay.
So that's
and like every big company uses them. So they are a single point of failure though because of that.
I feel like I've used them when I used to work at CBS. So
I'm sure you have. I'm sure you have. A lot of places in the internet use Okta and you don't even know.
Okay.
So
do you mind if we detour for a tiny second about the one other technical hack identified this week, which was actually quite scary, which is like for a certain particular zero knowledge proof implementation, almost all the implementations had this sort of one crucial piece implemented incorrectly. And there was this like 20-minute period where I was like trying to look through the Monero code to see if like the Monero code did it the same way, because obviously live network, a lot of money versus like most of the other ones are like layer 2s or in testnet, not totally live. But effectively, like a very high level description of what this attack is.
What can you name the project?
So Trail of Bits basically showed that Plonk, which is this zero knowledge proof algorithm, the paper for it actually had a bug in like what they wrote in the algorithm, like in the math. But then everyone implementing it was just like basically implementing the paper directly.
Yeah.
So they like basically copied it line by line. And it turned out the piece that they used, they copied incorrectly from like the bulletproofs implementation, which is in like partially in Monero and other places.
Oh.
So Plonk is implemented in a bunch of places like Aztec. Loop, I think maybe Loopring, not Starkware, because Starkware is completely different. And then a bunch of the Snark implementations on different layer ones.
Yeah,
so like what the one Tezos is using, the Polygon ones.
Yeah.
So just to give a high level understanding of like what this bug is, it's like kind of a little bit, it's not super complicated when you describe it in terms of like a sort of high level description of a zero knowledge proof.
All right.
So the
You're on the spot now. Go.
Highest level description of zero knowledge proof. I own some object, and you want to know if I have it. So what you do is you ask me a series of yes and no questions. You say, hey, is it golden? And I say yes or no. You say, hey, is it spherical? And I say yes or no. And then you say, hey, is it bigger than this room? You say yes or no. And so after a sequence of those questions, you can be convinced I have it without actually knowing enough about the object. That's like the very like 5-year-old, I think that's 5-year-old understandable explanation of zero knowledge proof.
Sure.
And the problem with that is it's very interactive. So you have to communicate a lot. Like I have to keep asking you these questions. I have to wait until you get a response. And so there's this thing called the fiat Shamir heuristic, which is basically instead of me giving you this back and forth, which is hard to manipulate, but very slow, I actually give you a sequence of questions all at once, but they're randomized. And you have to prove that you answer them in a random order. And so I give you some random number, and then you give me back the answer in like the correct random order. And that's like as if that'd be kind of the same as if I asked you those questions randomly. The problem is if you don't seed the randomness to that correctly, it becomes like this deterministic list and you get the same exact ordering every time. And that was basically at a very high level what the bug is. So then people then can like memorize the answer and then always answer the same question back effectively. Was that
was great, actually,
ELI
9 out of 10. Okay. Suddenly I understand zero knowledge proofs. It all clicked for me right there.
But that the idea with that is like you only have to send all the questions at once, right? It's like I sent you the test. I'm not doing it like interactively.
Yeah. So I think the takeaway from this was that actually, as you mentioned, it was a mistake in these papers that were all kind of copying each other, and nobody actually understood the particular mistake in the fiat Shamir part of the paper. And so they were kind of like, okay, well, you proved this part, you added this thing onto the end of it. But like somewhere up the chain, somebody should have understood. They're like, hey, you have to be very, very careful in how you use the fiat Shamir heuristic. And that sort of got lost in translation. And then the engineers who are actually implementing this stuff, they're not cryptographers for the most part. They're like security engineers or cryptographic engineers, but they're not themselves the people who are deriving this stuff in the first place. And so it's a good reminder that although, we talk about this a lot with respect to layer 2, is how layer 2 eventually is going to replace everything because it's so secure, it's got the same trust model as layer 1. That's only true if the engineering is like completely sound. And everything we know about engineering tells us that there is no engineering that is completely sound. There will always be bugs. There will always be mistakes. And you see it even in the history of like Zcash, which has had a history of these kinds of cryptographic errors that were not even the original paper. Actually, the paper was sound, but somebody messed up somewhere down the road. There's like basically the equivalent of like a transcription error that just gets amplified down the road. And then pretty soon it's like, hey, although the paper was right, because the paper can be proved in this closed form way, the stuff that we're doing that like kind of works around the paper to make it implementable ends up having a bug in it.
Yeah. It is funny. I feel like when I first got into crypto, people were obsessed with like consensus level attacks, like 51% attacks. And, like that was always a discussion of like, how is someone going to prevent a 51% attack on this network? And like, we basically never see 51% attacks, like only on kind of like the tiniest, shittiest network. And if anything, it's all these other types of attacks that have really proliferated, which again is not really solved with like a layer 2 necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I'd say is my co-author Guillermo always likes to say like the only real proof is actually being implemented and like running in live. And and one of the other things about my personal distaste, I think, for a lot of the zero knowledge proof papers is they're written in this like the proofs and the algorithms are written in this way where it's like, here is a model of the adversary and here's a model of like the user, and like here's an algorithm of like how they interact with each other. But the way you analyze how they interact with each other is kind of like piecemeal. You kind of like are like, this little way of like me sending you a challenge gives you report with like this type of reply. And when you prove things like that, instead of like trying to prove like broader properties, your proofs are all very case based. So you have like 500 cases, and like it's very hard to actually check every single one. Like as a reader, when you're reading a math paper, you should be like reading it, and when you get stuck, like you go try to rederive something and like verify the things. But the problem with these proofs have a million subcases is like no one's going to verify the 128 subcases, right? You try to like spot check, and like that's effectively, for better or worse, that's what peer review does too for these papers.
Wait, and so just so I understand what that is, that means like when you're creating it, people don't go through and test all the things that have already been written about how to implement it. They're just like testing specific, like random, like sort of like a random check at an airport.
So like when you write like a math proof, you say like, okay, I'm assuming A, and then there's some property A implies B, and then B implies C, and then C implies D. But the problem is you can also have not linear proofs where you say, I assume property A. Property A implies properties B1, B2, B3, ... B128. And then you have to look through all those cases separately. And the reader usually, that's not considered like an elegant math proof. It's usually considered like ugly when you have a lot of cases. And like aesthetic, people just won't read all 128 unless they're formally verified.
It's kind of like, imagine that you were proofreading someone else's book and they had like 500 citations. You're like, I'm not going to. Like, if you have like one citation for like the core thing, but if you have 500, I'll check a few of them. But like, I don't know, no matter how good of an editor you are, unless you're like you're working in a sweatshop, you're not literally going to check every single citation because you.
Yeah, that's not how it works in book publishing. But anyway,
Right.
But this actually leads me to, because the copy editor or proofreader or whatever, they will read everything and like check everything. I mean, not that I've done this job before. I mean, well, no,
Clearly, they're much more rigorous than the mathematicians.
Yeah.
I mean, trust me, peer review is a very broken process. You don't have to tell me.
But I do have a question, because this is something that I was wondering about in general about like the DeFi hacks and everything. So do you remember back when, this was a long time ago, but was it called IMBTC when they did that like ER77? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So just to catch people up in case they didn't follow this, there was like this exploit that happened and people were like, what were they thinking? Because the exploit was known already. It had been known for like a month or something. And then they implemented it in this way where everybody knew that it would be vulnerable. And so it was just like, this is such a stupid mistake. But I did have a question, because now that I'm seeing all these hacks, like, so for those of you who've been on my show, you might know that I have this checklist that I do before I record. And sometimes people are like, oh, this is like a really good list. And I'm like, oh, you're listening to a list of all the mistakes I've ever made on the show. But it made me wonder, like for DeFi and stuff, like, is there a place where people are kind of like, collating all these different errors and where people can kind of like look up like, oh, okay, so I'm about to implement such and such. Like, what are the known vulnerabilities? Like if I mistakenly implement it this way or that way, like are people doing that? Because if not,
there are these collections of them, but the problem is that, there's a lot of translation error that can happen where, you might write in your code base, you might write like A equals 1, I equals 7. And you always use that convention. But in someone else's code, they write baby equals 1 and iota equals 7. And then you have to like go through and translate and you rename the functions. Like no one is like consistently naming things, right? There's not like a single, the language is the same, but like the choice of sort of like dialect of like each programmer is actually quite different, which leads to these kind of like divergences between like a specification and the real thing. It's actually very hard to keep them like one-to-one.
Okay.
Also to Tarun's point about like, like nonlinear math proofs and like these weird combinatorial kind of issues when like many different factors interact with many different factors. I remember in the IMBTC thing, so IMBTC is sort of like a competitor to WBTC it uses ERC777, which is sort of a, different version of ERC20 that adds some extra functions and stuff like that. And then there was dForce, which dForce was just like a pure fork of Compound V2, which is a money market protocol. And so in isolation, these things are fine, right? Like a fork of Compound will behave the same as Compound. There's nothing inherently wrong with 777 or the implementation. But when you put these things these two things together. Well, it wasn't really built for this, and that sort of introduced the bug. And so it's like,
right.
if you're not thinking of all these different, you have many, many different dimensions that these things are intersecting on, and one bad intersection can sort of cause, a terrible cascade. So
Right.
Yeah.
And automatically checking these things may have more cases than the number of particles in the universe. So you're not going to be doing it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like we do have static analysis tools that will automatically run over code bases, but to your point, it's like backwards looking, right? It's like the last hack is the thing that you're able to check for, and the new hack, or like the sort of the generative interaction of multiple different potential bugs. Like there's so many ways in which things can interact in a way you didn't predict before, that if you deeply understand how all these things work and how they interconnect with each other, well, that's just being a super experienced security engineer. That's what a security engineer is for.
Yeah, I have another idea. I think samczsun should like kind of put his learnings into a course and then train people to do what he does.
Well, so
Is that like a crazy idea?
Diligence have like a big, is it Consensus Diligence that has like a big repository of all these like security patterns and stuff? So there are things like that do exist that people do learn from. And there's a Ethereum security bootcamp, I think, called Securium.
Yes.
Are they any good?
Like one in Amsterdam.
I've heard they're pretty good.
Oh, okay.
But the reality is, like, learning to be a security engineer is just actually really hard, because it's like learning to be a great editor, right? Like you can read a book on like, here are the big mistakes that previous books
a lot
made.
of it's just like sitting and monitoring things and finding stuff, and then like
but also I think you have to like think very creatively. Like samczsun must have some like good imaginative tools in his brain to like combine all that to like see things that other people cannot see.
Mm-hmm.
Like I bet he has a very creative mind.
Well, the other thing that is, it's very different to be an attacker versus a defender, right? Like the kinds of people who are very good, it's called sort of red team. Red team is like the people who go in and try to attack protocols and break them. The kinds of people who do that are not necessarily the best security engineers, right? To be a security engineer, you also have to be thinking about how to solve application level problems and make sure that, okay, we're going to build this thing in a secure way, but we also got to make sure that it works, that it's performant, that the UX is good. And you have to balance all those things together in order to build a protocol well. And of course, like with most of these protocols, like, I mean, we see it because we're VCs, and so we're backing a lot of these guys. There are very few security engineers who have meaningful experience, doing security in Solidity.
A maybe more kind of trite way of putting it is like, an attacker only needs a proof of existence. They need just like one counterexample, right? But a builder and security engineer need to be for all. They need to like consider for all cases. Clearly one is like way less work than the other.
Right.
Yes.
And like that ends up being like the biggest problem. It's like the combinatorial search space for the builder is like just so much bigger than the attacker. The attacker just only needs like one entry point.
For their
and there are
payday.
also so many more attackers than there are
Oh,
defenders
totally.
too. Yeah.
Like
Right.
the
the attackers are better funded. Right? Like
after they win, they are even better funded.
Yeah.
But so I say, like, the way to imagine it is like, if to be a security engineer in crypto is like you're a goalie, like, sort of soccer / football, or I don't know where your audience
Keeper.
is.
Yeah, but you have to work 24/7, 365.
Yeah, but everybody on the field is trying to get the ball
shoot
in,
it, yeah.
and they all have their own balls, right? Like
Right.
all these different balls, they're all kicking in, and you're constantly trying to catch things.
Right.
And if one person gets the ball in, the money's gone.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. But I did see like, I think this was about Beanstalk. Some security for auditing
Yes,
firm was
Perfect
Yeah.
segue.
Perfect transition.
like, oh yeah,
Perfect
wait, was
transition.
that
You
from
are the CEO.
Yes, you are clearly
Right.
the CEO of the show.
Well,
She's telling us, hey guys, time to move
Sorry,
on. You
no,
guys
well,
are taking too
I
long.
forgot. I was like, where did I read this? Okay, so you put it in the notes.
Yes. So let me
But-
give you the brief,
Oh, okay,
the
yes.
quick debrief on Beanstalk. So Beanstalk got hacked this week for 180 million, which makes them the 5th largest DeFi hack in history. So it's been a pretty bad month for on-chain hacks. We had the number 1 hack with Axe Infinity and then number 5 with Beanstalk. So the attack was actually pretty wild. And so I was looking into this yesterday, trying to understand exactly what happened. So the attacker made off with 80 million, meaning that 100 million of it was just, I guess, lost or unclear, just paid in LP fees or something.
But also they like donated it or something, right?
No, that's not
No?
what. Okay, so let me explain what happened. So now the thing about Beanstalk, so Beanstalk is a stable coin. It was like getting a lot of hype on, I remember you guys were talking about it a while back. So it's like a stable coin protocol, and the governance in Beanstalk was designed to be able to protect against drive-by governance attacks, right? And the way that it does that is that
Drive-by governance attack. Now, that's the first time I've heard that, and I love that phrase.
Well, so the idea is that when you put up a governance proposal, the governance proposal has to be live for at least 24 hours before it can be voted on. And then if you crosses the threshold of voting, then it gets implemented. So what the attacker did, so they needed some lead time because this is a governance-based attack, which is crazy. We haven't seen a lot of these.
Right.
So now, normally, if you just put up a governance-based attack that says, send me all the money, and then you take a bunch of tokens and you vote on yourself getting all the money, obviously no one's going to vote on that. They're going to be like, who the hell is this guy? And they're going to kick you out, right? So what they did two things simultaneously. So first is they put in two proposals almost exactly the same time. So first they put in this thing that was like, their governance proposal is called BIPs, like Bitcoin, but it's for Beanstalk. So they did BIP 18. BIP 18 was send all the money to the attacker. And then they sent in BIP 19, but they changed the name of it to BIP 18 to make it seem like it was a name collision. And that's what they put up on the governance forum. And BIP 19, which they called BIP 18, was let's donate $250K to Ukraine because Ukraine's having a really tough time and like, this is so great, we want to support Ukraine. And so both of these governance proposals were live for 24 hours, but no one noticed the real BIP 18, which was send all the money to the attacker. And after 24 hours passed, these things were up for a vote. And what the attacker did, so this was the big mistake that Beanstalk had in their governance, is that they did not make it resistant to flash loans. So somebody who flash loaned the token was able to vote in governance and use that to cross the threshold to implement a protocol change. So the attacker was able to flash loan a huge amount of the governance token, instantaneously vote on the proposal, pass it, receive the money.
Right before it ended, right before the vote ended.
Oh wait, did they have the borrow live?
No. I think they put the proposal up, and then the flash loan was later, right?
Oh, I see. Yeah, they took the flash loan and then voted.
The flash loan was like right before it ended.
I see, right before the period ended. Yeah. So they flash loaned a crap load of tokens, voted for their proposal right before the proposal window was about to end, which passed the proposal, which transferred all the funds into the attacker's wallet, and they made off like thieves and dumped all the tokens and washed it into Tornado. And all
the Ukraine wallet still got the also there was some very clever low-level bit twiddling to make the payment to themselves not look like the payment to themselves. They routed it to another function call. So like if you wanted to inspect it, you would actually like have to like go through a few layers before you realize there was a transfer call. It was like they were like making it look like it was doing like some very kind of complicated like updating.
What did it look like it was doing?
Like it looked like it was like doing some function to compute like what the new interest rate should be or something, and it was like named like that. And then like at the bottom, like this person was actually quite sophisticated, quite clever.
This is a very sophisticated attack.
I mean, the thing I personally enjoyed about it was there were like all these people who were just like, oh yeah, like I made like $5 million in B, and I'm like, I can't read their paper without like even being able to like analyze it. Like forget about their code. Like their code reads like nonsense. Because like they just name everything like after a farm animal, and like as I'm reading the code, it's like pig dot herd. It's
very reminiscent of Maker.
I almost like Maker better.
Yeah,
because the problem is the Maker words. Very few of them were English words, or like
right.
There are
so for people who don't know, this is a very famous thing that everybody in smart contract world picks on MakerDAO for. So MakerDAO has all these weird words that they invented for concepts inside of their smart contracts that nobody other than the Maker team understands. So there's vats and there's jars and there's tubs and there's
but
flap, flip, flop.
Yeah, they are real words, but
yes, they are real words.
The reasoning behind it though is it forces engineers to build to spec, right? When you have common English variable names, it's like, oh well, this is the interest rate and this is whatever, and you sort of create shortcuts in your mind of, oh, that's what this variable means. That's what this function means, as opposed to, we're going to sort of create this abstract, spec for what the function, what the protocol is going to do, and you build it this way, and then we check to make sure it was built this way, versus like, humans sort of playing tricks on themselves.
I understand the logic, but it is
very annoying.
Incredibly impenetrable because the fact
honestly, I actually think their design's way better than this. The bean thing was like, I remember looking at it, like, you know what? I'm not going to analyze this.
It is like it's like a seigniorage shares coin, but with like 2 extra coins. So there's like multiple levels of like expansion and contract. It's very weird. But yeah, someone actually made like a translated version of the MakerDAO code base at some point that actually had like the real variable names in.
Yes, Van de San.
Yeah.
He made it.
I see.
But I will say I just like enjoy the Schadenfreude mainly because like the only other Tarun in Twitter who is in crypto Twitter was the biggest bean shill, and like now he hasn't tweeted for 3 days, and I'm like, yes.
You need to tag him. We need to tag him on this episode. Wow.
His name is Rune on Twitter.
Oh.
Yes, that Rune. He was
That
really
Rune.
shilling.
He's on crypto Twitter?
Well, I feel like crypto Twitter
Adjacent.
people always
Okay.
retweet him.
I see. The biggest Haseeb, actually, this is a related story. So the biggest Haseeb is the CEO of Ifani, which is like a phone porting.
Oh yeah, I know him.
You know him, yeah. So like, I remember I met him in a cafe a long time ago because he was like, "You're the other Haseeb. I need to meet you." And I'm like, "Okay, I don't have the same need, but it sounds like you really want. Like, this is very important to you." And so we met up, and he was working on Lendroid at that time, which was like a big ICO at that time, and he was like, "I have the Twitter screen name Haseeb." I'm like, I know you do. He was like, yeah, it's really important to me. And I was like, I can tell. And he's like, but I don't have Haseeb.com. It's like some doctor in the UK, and I'm trying to get him to sell it to me. Can you help me? And I'm like, no.
Why would you help him?
I don't know. I'm like, no, I don't. I feel no affiliation despite that we have the same name.
There.
I know. But he's definitely he's crushing me right now. So I gotta play catch up
Well,
on
he's
the
crushing
the
you.
seed
How
game.
so?
Look, he's got to see the Twitter handle. I'm playing from behind.
Well, I think you have more followers.
I don't think that's. I don't think that's true. I think he has more followers than me.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, exactly. I'm eclipsed in every way by the other Haseeb. It hurts.
This
I can't
other
think of-
Rune has been on a very fast growth path
Has he?
because of the word cell.
That's true. Yes, that's right. He's the
invented that.
inventor of the word cell
Oh.
shape
Oh,
rotating thing.
I think that's so stupid.
I
You
agree.
think it's so stupid?
I do.
Okay, let's talk about
People
this.
love false dichotomies. Humans are just
Well-
like easily bandied into just believing.
It's not a false
they see
dichotomy.
this-
It's two axes.
yeah. A
Yeah,
Boolean
I
predicate
can't-
whose probability of success is 1/2 plus epsilon, where epsilon is 10 to the minus 80th, is not very useful.
Okay, I didn't understand
Yeah,
that,
wait,
but whatever.
I
I
just-
don't like simplistic things like that,
Yeah.
dumb down things like that. And I also don't like it that it like somehow like immediately portrayed journalists as like in some negative way. And I was just like, oh, this is like part of the whole whatever Silicon Valley like bashing of journalists. And I was like, oh, this is stupid.
Okay, so you're in a very interesting position because you're like you obviously have been a journalist, but then you're covering crypto Twitter, and you're
I am
also
a journalist. I am a
okay.
journalist.
You are a journalist. You are a
Damn,
journalist.
Haseeb.
You
That
are a
was cold.
journalist. Well, I mean, I think what you do now is like much more than just journalism.
Oh, really? How so?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like you're more like a commentator. You know, like you've
No,
kind
I'm
of taken
not.
on a broader role. I think you have.
Well, I mean, I get interviewed by the press, but like,
Yeah,
I mean, I still consider myself a reporter.
fair enough. Okay. Well,
no
you
author.
you consider yourself a
I
reporter.
like
I
the
don't think
author
of you
bit.
as a reporter. I don't think of you as a reporter. But
Oh, okay.
I think most people think of you as just like, you know, because you're not affiliated with the brand. I feel like it's very rare for reporters to not have their own. Like, I feel like, you know, all these guys who go on
you're kind of
Substack.
like crypto Louis Theroux. You know, you're documenting all the weird shit that happens in crypto, but you're amongst us. And,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You're one of the people. You're not like I'm from Forbes. Like, hello. Like,
Oh.
tell me all your secrets and then I'll write
Yeah.
about you.
Yeah, but
Hunter S. Thompson.
Hunter S.
Oh.
Thompson. Yeah. Well, it's like you're it's a
I don't-
different it's a different relationship. It's a different relationship with what you're covering than I think for almost any reporter.
well, I mean, I feel like my understanding of crypto is probably beyond that of a normal reporter, but like the way I conducted my work, I still think of as journalism, and I'm not doing any differently from how I did it at Forbes, except that like, yeah, I probably go deeper into it than you would for the Forbes audience, but people often do think of me as being in crypto. I do not think of myself as being in crypto. I think that I'm like
Really?
as close to being in crypto as you can be without actually being in it.
What does it mean to not be in crypto?
Well, because I'm a journalist covering it. So there's like, you know, like if you guys are all like the players playing the game, I'm the referee where I'm like kind of in the game, but not in the game. Like I'm not supposed to affect play. I'm not, you know.
But you did. You said people were convinced by you to like join and, you know, change their life.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, you're
but
playing the game. I mean, you might think you're not playing the game, but you're part of the game.
You're a referee wearing a
Yeah, you're like in the WWE when the referee like tears his shirt off and like starts beating the people in the ring. Like you're in the game.
oh my God, I don't think of myself that way. I mean,
Okay.
like, do you think that I'm like influencing events in crypto?
Oh,
I don't think so.
100%.
I mean, the
Oh,
DAO
how
hack
so?
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
that's-
what?
Come on, that
We
was-
ju- you just
but that's like
influenced the game.
that's a normal journalistic thing to do. Like you find out like who did this thing. That's
Yeah,
what,
I
like,
mean, the people on crypto Twitter who are like calling each other out and getting into fights.
I would say journalists
same
in
thing.
crypto have not had as much success at doing it, right? Like the Satoshi thing is a great example of
Yeah.
Right? so I don't know. Like if you're successful at it, I think it somehow does impact the market.
oh, interesting. But I don't think revealing who the DAO hacker was affected the market at all.
Well, not in the sense that like it impacted prices immediately, but it impacted how people's perception of certain projects was, right? And certain people at different times, and
Maybe.
impacts like their future.
I think maybe part of it too is like, frankly, I feel like the bar is very low for crypto journalism in general. Like there's maybe 5 crypto journalists I think of who are like smart and competent at their jobs. And obviously you are one of them. And so it's like, thank God we have Laura to actually like cover the industry well, because other than that would be kind of screwed. So I'm serious.
No, yeah, but I wouldn't be too hard on journalists like for getting things wrong, because I mean, this is like the basic thing about journalism. Like I've had people like my mom, for instance, she was a pharmacist, she's retired, and she like couldn't understand what I did because she learned this body of knowledge and then she like applies it every day, right? And like my job is I'm supposed to take things I don't necessarily know and learn them fast and like learn them well enough to explain them to other people. And it's a skill. It's like not like having the knowledge, it's a skill. So it's more about like being able to learn quickly and then being able to like explain things well. Yeah, in that regard, like I don't feel like I'm a crypto person. Anyway, whatever. You get what I'm saying. Like you guys have the knowledge. Like I don't think of myself as a crypto person. Like I can learn things and whatever, but like I'm not in there doing it. Like, yeah, people often come to me and it's weird. Like sometimes people act like they think that I know like everything in crypto, and I'm like, no. I'm like behind all my sources. My sources are the people who really know what's going on, and I have to like do my best to like eke it all out of them. But like, I basically harass them a lot to like get that information. But I don't, like if you were to ask me right now to do something in DeFi or like on Ethereum or whatever, it would take me like, I don't know, like 5 hours. Like I would be like, people would lose all respect for me. They would be like, oh, we thought she knew what she was doing in crypto, but clearly she doesn't. Because I spend all my time like creating content. I don't spend all my time like actually using the stuff, whatever. I like call people up and I want them to tell me things. So it's just different. Yeah.
You would also be surprised at how many professional investors in this industry have themselves never used crypto.
Oh yeah. No, that actually doesn't surprise me, because I actually think journalism and VC are like not that different.
Yeah.
It is true that a lot of the early TechCrunch writers became like venture investors like very like soon after.
Yeah. But TechCrunch is like, I think, especially chummy with the industry it covers in a way that like the Wall Street Journal is not. TechCrunch is like a kind of a different animal than like other media.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Okay.
But we never got to my audit point about the Beanstalk thing. So can we talk about that?
Yeah. Oh, let's talk about it.
Yeah, because like, so, somebody tweeted about the Beanstalk thing, like, oh, and they were an auditing company. They were like, this is why we only pay ourselves by the number of vulnerabilities that we identify. So they were saying like, we get paid by, every time we find a vulnerability when we audit something, we earn money from that. But like they were saying that other companies just charge by project or whatever. And then, so there's no incentive for them to like actually find things that went wrong, because they're going to make the same amount of money no matter what. So this company was saying like, we're incentivized. I don't remember if wasn't it you that put it in that?
Certic. It was one of the other ones.
Was it PeckShield?
PeckShield.
No.
I don't think we linked to it in the.
Okay, maybe
I mean, there's this other problem though that happens because like if you actually look at different audit reports, different auditors will consider different types of things, vulnerabilities, different severity, and like there's no like standards for what just the basics of like what a low, medium, and high vulnerability are. Every auditor makes ones that are different and like obviously biased towards the things they're better at. So like I feel like you're gonna have this like good heart law type of thing. Like if you make that the thing, everyone's just gonna optimize for like the low vulnerability ones that everyone has by accident, which are actually gas saving things. But like it'll have this good heart type of thing of like the metric you use will suddenly get like.
Well, there's never. I mean, that's true no matter what you do, though. So like, I can believe that it would be better, but at the same time, like, I mean, it's a good question of like, what are you actually buying when you buy an audit? And the reality is that like, okay, one thing you're buying is like, okay, if there's an obvious vulnerability, we want you to write it up and explain it to us. But a lot of what you're buying when you're buying an audit is you're buying like a stamp of approval of like basically a trusted third party saying like, you are good and it is safe to use you, right? Now, the vulnerability here in Beanstalk, like the core of the vulnerability was really that you did not have to lock up funds in order to vote, right? That was the core vulnerability. And that allowed a flash loan to go in and participate in this vote, which is like, if you remember, MakerDAO had this scare a long time ago. I can't remember who it was who like published it. Was it Brandon Curtis?
Well, it was B Protocol that did it.
Just B Protocol did,
flash MKR.
Oh, is that right?
Pass some vote. Everyone's like, what the fuck? They're like, one thing to go through. And they're like, don't do that.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yes.
And so MakerDAO had this big scare that like all of Maker could have been turned off or something, some horrible thing could have happened through a flash loan. And so Maker was the first one to say, okay, we're going to make it so that you cannot flash loan governance. But this is a very basic vulnerability that Beanstalk could have done to mitigate the whole thing.
The other very basic issue is they don't have a delay between when a proposal is passed and when it's actually implemented. So something like Compound, even if a malicious proposal goes through, there's a 48-hour delay between before it actually goes live, and same with like 0x and most other protocols. So it's
they did have a time lock. The problem is their time lock had like some sort of like the two proposal thing actually messed up their time lock execution.
Oh, really?
God.
No, it's actually not. So it's a little bit more subtle, unfortunately. That like the person who did this did notice a lot of like kind of nuance about the time lock.
I'm curious about that because I know there's like obviously delay between when a proposal goes live and when it can be voted, but even like again for Compound, even if something gets approved, like it doesn't actually go live for another 48 hours.
Yeah. So the problem here is that when you have two proposals that are proposed at roughly the same time, you have this problem where like the time lock only really applies to one if you don't set it up correctly. And so a lot of places will just be like, you can only have one proposal live at a time, or or they have to be staged in some way. Whereas the Beanstalk thing did not have that.
I see.
Did they roll their own governance?
No, everyone just modifies Compound, like pretty much.
Okay,
but they didn't include those parts.
Yeah.
So in general, after these DeFi hacks, how do they turn it into real money? Do they, and because like we've seen that a lot of like exchanges or whatever will kind of blacklist the addresses, but like, are people actually getting money out of it?
Oh yeah.
It depends. Sometimes it is very hard to liquidate. If you have a stable coin and you can't get it across the bridge, but in this scenario, they just put a bunch of ETH into like Tornado Cash, and then depending on the size of the anonymity pool for the asset also that you're hacking, you may or may not be able to anonymize that effectively. But I think for this amount, it shouldn't be like too difficult depending on how long they wait and how long they are,
It is significantly easier for Bitcoin though, I will say. Like,
oh, interesting.
Just like the volume of just
using
like
Wasabi, which now we all know you can demix that. So
yeah, you can demix it with a lot of resources, right? So the question is like, is someone willing to pay that much to demix? And so for like an 80 million hack, it might actually not be like, you might not get someone who's
wait, hold on. Are we actually, do we all agree that you can just demix Wasabi transactions now?
Oh,
because I registered, I think when we originally talked about this, I was like, I'm skeptical of this.
Yeah, that reminds me. I know. We'll discuss this another time.
Wait, what?
Because there's a video. I will somehow have to find this in my Twitter mentions that I did mean to watch, where someone like made some video where they analyzed kind of like what happened with the DAO hacker and like what happened with that demixing. And it was like a Twitter handle where I was like, oh, this person would definitely know. And I meant to watch it. I never got to watch it. So let me do that.
Okay.
I've had like such a whirlwind 2 months or whatever. So
to be continued.
Yeah. But
at least
you're right.
there's
that
some
is a
partial information that's
right. If you messed up kind of post mixing, like, okay, I can totally understand that there.
I just think the Bitcoin mixing services have way more liquidity, and also the Tornado withdrawal sizes are like, they don't have enough. Yeah, they don't have enough.
They like 10 mil a day.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I agree that 80 mil could get out, but like if it was like the Ronin hacker would be.
Like there's nothing you can.
Yeah. I mean, didn't they just like mass sell on Curve and just turn the bean into USDC?
So then, how much did they get?
80 million.
Wow. Okay. So then that answers my question, because the question I was going to ask is like, I thought that a lot of these people couldn't even cash out. Because
I mean, cashing out, like turning it into a different asset is one thing, cashing out is another thing.
Yeah. Do you mean like getting into dollars in a bank account?
Well, just getting away with something where they can actually make money from it. However, we're defining
you get clean ETH, like, you can sell it and report it as income. I think the IRS is very explicit that like, they actually don't care if you're committing crimes as long as you like declare income and pay taxes on it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no, it's a whole thing.
So you think these hackers are...
Yeah.
are paying money on their hacks.
You could there's like a other income. I mean, if they don't want to get caught by the IRS, they should be paying taxes.
That's how they got Al Capone, right?
True.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's fine to do crime as long as you pay your taxes.
Okay.
Otherwise,
Well, but the reason I was asking was because I was wondering, some of these bounties are like somewhat generous. I mean, so one of the, I don't remember which one it was, but one of them was like roughly 2 million or something. And I was like, oh, well, if they can't really cash out, then like it's better if they take the 2 million.
They can cash out more than 2 million.
Yeah. Well, clearly now.
Beanstalk tried to renegotiate, and I said, hey, send us back 70. You can keep 8 for yourself, and we won't go after you. We won't look after you. Like it'll be done. And
right. That's
they're
what
gone.
I was.
That does not sound like it would have worked. That does not sound like it would have worked.
I do think it's still a little hard to like sell all of it at once.
Not at once.
I feel like usually what people do is they really
lower
use
your
it as
time
collateral, and then they start just like collecting, kind of like earning spread via perps and things like Bybit used to be kind of the exchange that the hackers all go to because they never did KYC.
Now,
They used to just never KYC.
Right. I mean, there's still a few non-KYC exchanges, but they don't. Most of them don't do that much.
There's just no volume. Yeah, you can't really get out there.
Yeah. So
also, a lot of banks won't like ACH won't wire to them and stuff. So it's like you kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I have to assume most of these attackers are not American anyway. So,
but they still may want to wire to a real bank account eventually.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Because like, we're not in a world where everyone's using stablecoins yet for everything. So.
Yeah. At that size, it becomes difficult. But look, if you're North Korea, then
if you're North Korea, it's fine, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're North Korea, then you're not gonna pursue a bug bounty.
Probably not. Okay, the last piece of news that I want to discuss was a lot of what I feel like I was getting on Twitter and a lot of chatter from people was about the merge being delayed, and I feel like this is like the biggest non-story of all the stories this week. That like somehow everybody was talking about this, and I was like, how on earth did you think that like the Ethereum Foundation was going to hit this deadline? Of all the deadlines they've missed in their entire lifetime, like clearly they're awful at software estimation, and we should just like bake that in to the numbers that goes. But somehow like nobody was doing that.
It's probably because there's been so many delays that like it just feels like at some point it's gonna happen. And so when people were saying June, and they were saying it for kind of a long time. But you're right. I had Tim Bago on my show last.
I listened to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was like, again, like very non-answer of like, oh, we're not good at estimating. I'm like, we know you're not good at estimating.
But I can't remember if this was in the recording or not, if he just said it before, but he was just like, I'm surprised that people are all up in arms about this, because he was like, I kind of offhandedly said June, and it wasn't like a fixed thing, but everybody had it like as a fixed deadline.
I mean, it's exactly the problem with the Ethereum Foundation, that they're like, well, we just say things. Why would anyone care what we say? Like we're just a bunch of dudes.
I also think if someone wants a little data science project to dox a lot of the development, correlate the commit times to the hackathons, and you'll see this like it looks like a heartbeat. It's like that's why they have to have a hackathon every month, because otherwise nothing nothing.
Totally
gets
gonna
done.
check that out.
Yeah, there's like a lot of weird correlation with the hackathons. But one thing I would say is like, I think the longer that's delayed, the weirder or worse it is for ETH security, because like the sheer dominance of staking derivatives at this point, and the percentage of the network that's like sitting waiting for like in the one-way contract, just like and having like staked ETH being levered, kind of just like means that there's just going to be this huge amount of sell pressure as soon as the network goes live. Because there are all these people who've locked up capital for a while. Yes, sure, they're earning some interest on their staked ETH somewhere, but it's not like a lot. And there's just an enormous amount of capital locked up that's just waiting for it to come out on the other side. And like all those people have to sell at some point, right? Like especially if they're funds, they're going to get like capital calls, etc. Right? I don't know how many funds are going to return staked ETH.
But
I
disagree with that. Though. I disagree with that, because we don't know how much is going to come in the other way. Right? Like once the opportunity cost of staking goes way down because of the fact that you can actually go two-way, I think you'll see a lot of capital is like, look, I'm not going to risk going into proof of stake when like I don't know that proof of stake will ever actually be that two-way street. And even when the proof of stake merge happens, it's like another upgrade until people can actually withdraw.
But I just mean the people who are going into Lido, there are people raising funds that literally are just taking like 5% fees just to put you into Lido.
Wait, what?
Right, what? Yeah, there are people. It's the same as these people raising funds to go into Anchor. So there's these people who are raising funds where they're basically charging people 5% to take stablecoin, to take dollars, and they convert to UST, and then they put it into Anchor, get 20%.
Oh yeah,
give you
that's
back.
like
Yeah. There's a ton of people doing the same exact thing for Lido, and they're all doing the levered Lido. So to give some context, if you have a bunch of ETH, you want to lock it into the bridge contract, so you're validating the beacon chain, you can earn interest on your Ethereum, but you can't really get it out. So you've locked it up and you're earning interest, but you can't actually remove it. Staking derivatives allow you to pool ETH with other people's ETH, and then there'll be validators that go earn that yield. And then there's sort of this IOU called staked ETH that you get. And staked ETH is extremely liquid and in every DeFi protocol. So you could effectively treat it like ETH, and it stays pegged. Actually, weirdly stays pegged, because theoretically it should actually be worth more, but everyone is discounting exactly by the rewards, which is like a very funny fact. It's sort of like a weird anomaly in some ways. Like other staking derivatives don't have this property. And so people have the staked ETH, but it's all an IOU for the real ETH, right? And they can't actually get back their real ETH. And if people are raising these funds where they're like, hey, we'll go do the whole like staking thing for you. And it's like some institution that like bought a bunch of ETH and they're like, we'll take 5%, you get like the remaining. Those funds eventually have to close out, right? They have, and they're not. Are they going to return staked ETH to the? If that happens, then everyone who gets the staked ETH is going to just sell for real ETH eventually, right? Yeah. So like, there's some kind of, the longer this takes, the more the crazy levered behavior we're seeing. We're seeing people like lever up on staked ETH like crazy.
Yeah, actually, I think like Babylon Finance released something this week where, I mean, this is your whole thing around basically automate the strategy of putting on staked ETH, borrowing ETH, turning into staked ETH, putting it back, and just like levering up. And they're estimating like 8-10% using this strategy. But the question is just like, when do we see ETH interest rates go up to sort of compensate and like exactly pull in the market? And
this whole ultrasound money thing only works when this type of levered game is not happening. And that is going, everyone wants anchor yields. Like Doe has basically made it so that everyone has to be chasing 20%. And like everyone in ETH land thinks that's not true, but when you look at what's happening with staked ETH, it's like, oh yeah, everyone is literally just trying to chase Doe.
Yeah, this is why the Fed's hiking rates. They're like, we gotta match anchor right now. It's really competitive out there.
I just wanted to point that out. There's like something weird on the financial side that I feel like the developers don't seem to give a shit about, because everyone in ETH, every ETH developer I talk to is like, staking derivatives are dumb, like they'll never survive. And it's like, well, actually, there's such a huge portion of ETH in there now that it's a little bit not true.
That's fair.
Wait, so I know this is like a slight detour and we don't have to address it right now, but I am curious what you think of the whole Anchor thing, because like I had Kevin Zhou on my podcast. And
from Galois.
I love that clip you had. The Twitter clip of his thing was excellent for Anchor.
Yeah, I mean, because like he thinks it's not gonna, it's not going to pan out, and it's definitely, just going to go south at some point. So I was just curious, like, what you guys thought, because, like, yeah, just if you follow that whole thing on Twitter, like, there's very polarized views on either side.
Yes. Well, first caveat: we're investors in Anchor, so we invested in early round. What's our view? I don't know. I guess I'd say that, like, so Anchor did modify the protocol so that the interest rate can actually move over time, so it can now adjust compared to what it was before, which is like this flat 20%. But it's over I think it's like once a month. It can calibrate by like 1.5% or something like that. So it can't actually respond that quickly or in real time. I guess it's like closer to the Fed, I guess, and then kind of very staggered moves. By and large, I think the biggest risk is not actually to Anchor itself, but more to Terra, although they're both obviously very interlinked. At the end of the day, like all these algorithmic stablecoins have to get exogenous usage. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. And so the question, Kevin was sort of pointing like, look, there's no exogenous usage for this stuff, which like, okay, I mostly agree. So the answer is that they got to get exogenous usage, otherwise the thing's going to break.
I think another interesting thing that scares me more about it, and this is not necessarily a knock on UST, this is more a knock on the type of people who are putting ridiculous amounts of money into Anchor, is like a lot of the dumber TradFi people that I know, who are like, probably couldn't tell you what a hash function is. They don't know what an address is. They're the ones who are really aping into this stuff and putting in like $100 million into like these Anchor funds. And they don't know anything about crypto. They're just like, someone told them 20% on cash. Wow. And they're just
God.
And so that scares me, because I'm like, wow, these people, that it's like this psychology, people who don't even know what they're investing in is always like that to me is like, feels very like Big Short.
Yeah.
Somehow,
Yeah.
something about that's like scary.
Going back to the crypto journalism stuff we were talking about earlier, there were like 2 profiles on Doe out this week, and Luna specifically. I think there was like one in Bloomberg and like one in the Journal. And I just feel like it's a testament to like crypto journalism. Like, where have you been for the past year? Like, this has been a thing for the past year, like the Luna UST rise, and it's like, oh, now that it's at whatever $10 billion or whatever, it's like, oh, what's going on with like Luna? What's going on with like Anchor? I'm like, what? Like, it's like, just very. And anyway, there was a lot of concern and about the whole Anchor UST situation.
Yeah,
I will say,
but I just have to say, like, that's the nature of our job. Is like news has to happen, and then we like write about it. So it's like always like after the fact. But anyway, keep going.
I think the one thing I do really appreciate, I think long term for UST from a developer standpoint, if they can get to it, is actually building good smart contracts on Cosmos that can interact with all the other Cosmos chains. And like if they do that, I think the usage will come. I actually am more bullish on the Cosmos like app chain world for certain types of applications. And
I mean, the problem is the USD supply is so big. They have to, I mean,
right. Well, the
you're not
USD
gonna be able to
supply is
absorb
big
that.
because they're these random like private equity,
Yeah, I
like,
agree. But like,
blowhards, like putting in
unwinding that is going to
$100
be an absolute
Yes,
nightmare,
it's
right?
gonna
So
be-
like they have to, I mean, it's kind of like they're at that size now. It's kind of like when you grow your government too big, you have to like find some use for them. Otherwise it's going to be extremely painful to get rid of people. And it's same thing for companies, right? But like governments is the most obvious example because they tend to get bloated and then not like
Contract,
it's
yeah.
not
It's like a
contract.
one-way ratchet.
Exactly. And the problem with UST is kind of similar. It's very difficult to drain UST and say, okay, this thing got a little out of hand. Let's like kind of wind things down a little bit. And like it's so sensitive to deleveraging that it's just very hard to do it. The answer has to be you have to find the growth to justify your current supply.
Yeah, they need to do QT. They need to start winding it down.
Yeah, and that's probably well. So I didn't know that much about these hedge funds and these anchor.
Yeah, no,
funds.
there's
That's
just people
crazy.
marketing these like vehicles where
That's-
they're like,
that's-
oh,
that's
you
very-
like
that's very
you
scary,
can't get
actually.
15% on anywhere else in your dollars. Just give us dollars.
Yeah,
We're only
no,
putting
that's-
in dollars.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, that is scary.
And it's funny because like so many of the pitches that we get are like, oh, you can use Anchor to like bank the unbanked. You can go start a neobank in like Africa or in Indonesia or whatever, and you can give them 20% interest. It'll be so great. Everybody will sign up for this. And like the story from Anchor from the beginning has been like anybody can go get get yield on stables, and that's
I
really
mean, the
great.
difference between the outcomes, I think, for Terra and Cello are that Cello tried to go for the banking the unbanked narrative, and
I mean, they're
Terra went
converging
for
now.
yeah.
They're
Terra
increasingly
went for
converging
the
now.
like
The people with money.
people with money
Yeah.
thing, and it like clearly that did have a cycle.
I mean, it's funny because there were like so many of these like crypto-backed neobanks out there that are basically trying to do this, right? Hey, give us dollars, and you put in a Compound or Aave or something else, like not necessarily Anchor specifically. And they've had a lot of trouble growing, and people have sort of thoughts as to why that is, like, are they not spending enough on acquisition or whatever. But one of the theses and sort of what I've heard from some of these companies is like, it's really hard to advertise. We'll give you 8% on your dollars, like don't ask questions. And because people think it's inherently a scam. So it's very funny to me that like, at least anecdotally from them, retail is like very skeptical of the 8% yield. But
Institutions are like, sign me up. That sounds great. I'm sure there's not a
the
catch.
bell curve meme.
Yeah.
I think that's what you need for this. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, you need
Yeah.
the bell
Yeah.
curve.
Yeah, middle of the bell curve is where you die. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But
So I don't know if this is like taking us too far off topic, and also I didn't know what the time is, but I feel like, just to go back to your Cosmos comment, I feel like I hear a lot of chatter about Cosmos, but not about Polkadot. And I just wondered,
it's
is
for a
that,
reason.
yeah, so
For-
explain that to me.
Tarun, do you want to explain?
I don't know if there's like a pretty strong reason other than like Cosmos was able to bootstrap a lot of liquidity, and like it's just easier to get started writing Cosmos app chains.
Oh,
And once Osmosis became kind of like the connector, so the Cosmos model, I would say the initial weak part, in my opinion, obviously extreme Cosmos fans will probably maybe disagree, is that the Atom coin has pretty much no usage. There's no reason to actually go to the hub, which is like the main place that Atom is staked. And instead, it would be much better if you had like something like a DEX that was sort of like secured, a DEX chain that was secured, because then everyone has to go through there, and it kind of like can kind of have this like virtuous cycle. And so Osmosis did that, and that kind of bootstrapped everything in Cosmos because everyone in Cosmos Land was running their own app chains. Like no one was using IBC. But then the killer app for IBC was really DEXs and like being able to go between these chains and like have liquidity on different chains. And I think the UX on Cosmos chains, the wallets are really, really magnificent. I think like probably the best acquisition in crypto in the last 2 years was the Osmosis team buying Kepler, which is the main wallet and is probably the best wallet in crypto.
There's about
better
to be...
than Phantom, better than MetaMask, it is the best UX, period.
Wow. I'll have to try it.
You should try it.
Yeah, there's about to be a new record for best acquisition, but that news will probably come out soon.
Well, I think that the price that the Osmos that was the best acquisition. Like they literally made the whole ecosystem. It went from $1 billion to like 17 billion because of that wallet.
Yeah.
And
they paid a very tiny amount, relatively speaking.
Right.
And then what about Polkadot?
Well, so I think the thing about Polkadot,
Polkadot.
I don't think it's about wallets. I
know.
I think it's a more fundamental strategic mistake.
Substrate is hard to use.
So there's a bunch of stuff about the actual tech stack and also about kind of how top down Polkadot has always felt relative to Cosmos, which has always been kind of more bottoms up. Cosmos is also much older. Also caveat, we're early investors in Cosmos as well. But the big thing that I think Polkadot messed up is the parachain model and the parachain auctions, right? So like Polkadot decided that in order to use Polkadot, instead of like on Cosmos where you kind of, it's much more open-ended and you kind of, you find your place in the Cosmos ecosystem and you carve out your own niche. The idea for Polkadot is like, hey, if you want to use Polkadot, you need to sign up for this auction. You need to pay a bunch of money or like, stake a bunch of assets and compete in this like big pageant of, who's going to win the next auction. And like, oh, it's going to be this guy or that guy. And so projects have to raise a crap load of money to pay it to Polkadot and wait, or raise debt and wait a very, very long time until they get actually integrated and win the auction. Now, if you're an entrepreneur, you're like, okay, I could go to any chain. I can build anywhere because I'm an awesome entrepreneur and I'm in very low supply because there aren't a lot of great entrepreneurs. So you say, okay, well, I could go to Solana where they'll pay me a lot of money. I could go to Avalanche where they'll pay me a lot of money. I could go to Polygon where they'll pay me a lot of money. I could go to Cosmos where I could like build bottoms up and like do whatever. Or I could go to Polkadot and pay them a lot of money.
Right.
But wait, what? Why are you asking people to pay you money when like everyone else understands the transaction goes the other way? You need to attract developers, not charge developers.
Yeah.
And Polkadot like just has, well, in order to be sustainable, we got to charge people. Otherwise, what's the point of DOT?
Yeah, but
I mean, it's great for DOT, bad for Polkadot, and Cosmos is like great for Cosmos, but terrible for Atom.
Atom is Dogecoin of layer one.
Yeah,
I honestly like it. Truly doesn't really have much of a purpose. They've tried to make. They basically try to copy Osmosis, build a DEX, build a bridge, all this stuff. But like none of they just kind of missed out on liquidity.
I'm curious actually to get your thoughts on. I know there's like a new Cosmos proposal right now to basically like allow people to use existing Cosmos validators, so like sort of bootstrap their own like validator set, which is sort of more Polkadot like. Like, what do you think of that?
I think the liquid staking is effectively the easiest way to do that, and like that's why I think you're seeing a lot of these chains have these staking derivatives where basically like I can pay validators validating another chain in this other chain's coin, which is basically a version of the Polkadot crowd loan, except because there's so much liquidity on Cosmos, it's like actually easier to bootstrap because it basically will feel like Lido to the end user. But I actually think the Polkadot crowd loan model is actually very elegant. The problem is it's like impossible to bootstrap for this reason. Like, who wants to pay to use it to start? And like, they have this thing called a crowd loan where basically you pay some portion of your token supply up front, and then people basically fund you with dots. But then again, the dot holder base is not that diversified, so you don't really. It's like, I think if there were like more dot holders who were like not super close to the original team, like there you might see more. You might have seen more crowd loans.
No, but the flaws that you're describing, now that I know more about Gavin from writing my book, they sort of make sense to me, actually.
What do you mean?
Well,
I was going to say, you're the Gavin expert here, so you should be telling us about Polkadot.
Well, but from your read of the book, like, do you agree that it sort of makes sense for his personality?
Totally.
Because,
It's like kind of megalomaniac style. Like everything has to go through me. Yeah. Like Gavin. Yeah. I think that was, it was, so this is the Cryptopians. Yeah, it was pretty interesting. I think there's like always these like cult of personalities around early crypto people or crypto people in general. Like I know a lot of people cite their investment thesis for Polkadot being, oh, well, Gavin Wood is the CTO of Ethereum. I'm like, Yeah, but like, what do you know about Gavin beyond?
What about Charles
CTO of Ethereum?
Hoskinson, CEO?
Yeah.
Oh my God, you guys, today
Oh,
I was
man.
at the dentist, and when he found out what I did, he engaged me in this kind of long conversation about crypto. And at a certain point, he was like, well, what about Cardano, as he called it? And I was like, oh my God. And then I said to him, I was like, you should read my book. I was like, if you're interested in this, you should read my book. But no, I mean,
Sounds
yeah.
like the worst dentist appointment ever. if my dentist started talking about
Honestly,
Cardano, I would
no,
not come back.
honestly, though,
This is at the end.
dentists are exactly the demographic that Cardano is
100%,
targeting.
100%. The average user of Cardano is a dentist.
No,
That-
average owner.
Average owner.
User?
Sorry, user.
Yeah.
It's getting some stuff. There's stuff happening on Cardano
It
now.
is the thing that Nomad is bridging to. They have an EVM chain which is generating almost all the transactions. That's like
Oh,
hilarious.
wow.
Like
so good.
it's like none of the Cardano native apps are running.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
yeah.
hilarious.
Gavin
but
does have
it's
a lot in common with Dom from Definity, I feel like. It's very similar
Oh,
personalities.
yes. Oh my
Very similar
God, that
personalities.
is such a good call. I never thought of
Yeah.
that. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing. It's like everything in crypto that works has been very grassroots. Like,
Right.
Well, that's not true. That's not true. Not everything. Most things in crypto.
Well,
that are working
Bitcoin,
very
Ethereum.
grassroots. Yeah. Yeah.
Solana probably is like biggest exception.
Solana, I think Avalanche is also,
Yeah, Solana,
less
Avalanche.
grassroots. I think Terra, obviously. Terra is like the least
Yes.
grassroots.
Yeah, but I consider all of those like new and not established. Solana, Avalanche, Terra. Like,
Sure. But I think Cosmos, I think, is very grassroots. I guess there are different approaches, right? So maybe that was a bad comment because I think we've seen success in both different.
Yeah, I think it is very more bizarre and much less cathedral. Like anytime anyone comes in with like their master plan of like how to solve crypto, it's like this is not going to work.
What did we say about stablecoin
Yeah, I know.
inventors?
Yeah.
It's very related to that discussion last time. Okay, well, I think we're over time, so we're going to have to wrap for today. So thank you, Laura, for
Yes,
joining us today as our
fun.
very special guest. This
I
was
hope
lot
I
of
did a
fun.
good stand-in of Robert.
You were very Robert-like.
Right.
You were almost as good as the Robert
I
himself.
didn't say GM.
You did. Well,
You just did.
you did bring a
At
lot
the
of
end.
DeFi daddy energy today. Or no, what was it? Lending
Lending
daddy?
daddy,
Lending
yeah.
daddy. You did bring a
Okay,
lot of lending
good,
daddy energy.
good.
So I appreciate
Happy to
that.
do it.
All right. Well, that's it for today. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And I think next time we'll be back in the metaverse. So
Yes, we will.
that's it.
Cool.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.